Bonjour mesdames et messieurs, bienvenue à Montréal. My name is Denis Chagnon and I will be your master of ceremony for the next 3 days. It is an honor and a pleasure for me to welcome you to this second annual Global Aviation Security Symposium. The theme of AVSEC 2018 is the need to know. It emphasizes the importance of a wider understanding of the specific threats, vulnerabilities, and risks involved in aviation security. Our focus over the next 2 days will be to examine the potential benefits and the challenges of sharing information. Accordingly, the symposium has been designed to ensure optimum participation throughout the 2-day event. During the various panels, world experts will present case studies and experiences on a wide range of issues dealing with security and facilitation. To ensure your participation in the debates, we again this year are making available an app that allows you to ask questions during panel sessions, respond to polling opportunities, and stay connected with your fellow participants throughout the event. You can download the app via your own app store under ICAO event, or alternatively, you can go directly to the website. And actually, full instructions are contained on the first page of your symposium program. There is also an aviation security and facilitation booth where you can meet ICAO representatives from your respective regions to discuss security and facilitation issues and activities of interest to you specifically. The schedule of these meetings will be announced at each one of our breaks. Finally, I would invite you to visit the many sponsors and exhibitors who have joined us for the industry exhibition. Our industry partners very much look forward to exchanging with you on the latest technological developments and innovations that ensure a more secure and user-friendly environment for the travelers. Before we get underway, I do have a few housekeeping items. I would kindly ask that you place on silent mode your telephones for the duration of the event so that we don't distract from the presentations of our speakers. I would also ask that you return promptly to the assembly hall following coffee breaks and lunch breaks. In that way, we can complete our program on time and give all of our speakers their allotted time. And again, this year, we have simultaneous interpretation in the 6 official languages of ICAO. And now it gives me great pleasure to invite to the lectern the Secretary General of ICAO, Dr. Fang to officially open AVSEC 2018.
Thank you, Denis, for your kind introduction. 各位贵宾
Distinguished guests, good morning to all. Welcome to Montreal.
To welcome you to Montreal as we embark upon this second ICAO Global Aviation Security AVSEC Symposium. Today is actually the second day of a full week of AVSEC-related discussions here at ICAO, and we're very encouraged to see how many of you have joined us to benefit from them. During yesterday's presentations and panel sessions, we heard some thought-provoking ideas, and we spent an entire day exploring aspects of industry engagement. ICAO also presented 6 of our Sky Talk information sessions yesterday. And if you were unable to attend these interesting presentations live, they can be accessed on our website and through the ICAO event applications. Building on yesterday's inputs and discussions, over the next 2 days, we will focus our attention on recognizing and overcoming some current barriers to sharing information. This is a very important subject at present given that current threats facing the aviation community are continuously evolving. Concealment methods for improvised explosive devices, IEDs, for example, have become more creative, and concealed contraband items are harder to detect. Any chemical, biological, and radiological CBR agents are an increasingly worrisome threat. Then, there is the issue of how decentralized recruitment and attack planning are making detection and prevention exceedingly difficult. Additional and escalating dangers are also being posed by negligent, malicious, or weaponized operation of remotely piloted aircraft systems. This includes the increasingly frequent near collisions with commercial aircraft we've been witnessing. It's important to recall that the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2309 emphasized the need for information sharing and cooperation in order to combat these types of evolving threats. Similarly, the ICAO Global Aviation Security Plan, GASeP, clearly stresses the importance and value of sharing critical threats and risk information. Mutually supportive in many respects, these two pivotal policy initiatives continue to serve as guiding frameworks in the global community's efforts to protect civil aviation. This helps to explain why, in just the 14 months since we last gathered here for AVSEC 2017, ICAO has taken significant steps to seek to their effective implementation sector-wide. In June of this year, for instance, we participated in the United Nations High-Level Conference of Heads of Counter-Terrorism Agencies of Member States. On this event's margins, ICAO led a side event on implementation of the Global Aviation Security Plan in the light of UN Security Council Resolution 2309. That these GASeP sessions enjoyed such strong participation speaks in part to the growing focus on the relevance of civil aviation security and the growing global recognition of ICAO's leadership in this effective oversight and continuous enhancement. Draw your attention to these points on the global stage has been a very key priority of mine as ICAO Secretary General. To help underscore this point, the Executive Director of the Counter-Terrorism Executive Directorate, CTED, and I formalized a new arrangement of cooperation in May of this year. This will henceforth see us combining resources to a level not previously witnessed and working more closely together to more effectively prevent and counter terrorist threats and to surpass future acts of unlawful interference. Already, we've begun partnering on a variety of workshops, events, and guidance materials, and ICAO personnel continue to participate in CTED state assessments, working to monitor member state implementation of relevant Security Council counter-terrorism resolutions. At the same time, new work on the GASeP is also progressing very well. 4 GASeP conferences were held, serving all ICAO regions, and participants at each determined new and tailored GASeP regional roadmaps. This sets of regional GASeP targets and timelines complement the GASeP's overarching roadmap while emphasizing any critical areas of particular regional concern. Our ICAO regional offices have been critical to the success of this global outreach, and they continue their work with their accredited member states, local industry bodies, and international organizations to achieve their respective GASeP milestones. And just as with Resolution 2309, or the GASeP more generally, the principle of information sharing is a key factor in these regional efforts. Until and unless we are able to fully ensure that the right people have the best information to act upon, the aviation community and the security bodies we increasingly work with will continue to experience difficulties in achieving our goals. Although information sharing, particularly as it relates to threats, has been a topic of discussion among us for many years, more progress must be made in ensuring all affected state and industry stakeholders are provided a necessary level of detail to prevent a planned attack. This being understood, we must also acknowledge that expanded sharing is not without some drawbacks. One conundrum is that the same people who need the details can also be the ones who might exploit. Corruption or compromise of employees at all levels, from airport staff to security personnel to pilots, provides potentially unfettered access to the target unless appropriate screening and security controls are implemented. This helps to explain why this symposium will explore information sharing in the context of the 5 GASeP priority outcomes that are: first, risk awareness; second, security culture; third, technology and innovation; fourth, quality control and oversight; and fifth, capacity building. And accordingly, the moderators and panelists you'll be hearing from have been selected in light of their wide range of views and perspectives on the benefits, mechanism, and implications of wide information dissemination. Ladies and gentlemen, immediately following this symposium, ICAO will conduct the second high-level conference on aviation security. Member states, international organizations, and various associations have submitted information and working papers for discussion at that event, where attendance will be limited to our member states and official invited observer bodies. However, we should not lose sight of the fact that the high-level conference participants will be drawing upon the topics and debates conducted at this symposium and at yesterday's Industry Engagement Day. As we prepare together for the 40th session of the ICAO Assembly next year, the outcomes you produce during this year's AFSEC week will be immensely important in defining some critical next chapters in aviation security and its increasing appreciated role in combating global terrorism. I therefore wish you all a very productive and engaging next 2 days with us, and I will greatly look forward to reviewing your outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Secretary General. Thank you for setting the stage for these important 2 days as we look at some of the many challenges that we will be facing in the years to come. On that theme, we now turn to the Leaders' Plenary, which is an opportunity for senior leaders in the aviation community and most specifically in the Security Aviation Committee to discuss their perspective on those challenges that we face in countering threats to civil aviation. Taking part in the panel are the Secretary General and Mr. Sylvain Lefoyer, who is sitting in the middle as Deputy Director in the Air Transport Bureau. And I would take just a few moments to give you a few biographical notes on some of our other members of the panel. From left to right, or from right to left, according to where you stand. We have Congressman John Katko, who serves as chairman of the Subcommittee on Transportation and Protective Security for the Committee on Homeland Security in the U.S. House of Representatives. He has passed numerous bipartisan pieces of legislation to improve aviation security and reform the Transportation Security Administration. Enacted bills authored by him include legislation to mitigate insider threats to aviation security, reform TSA acquisitions and procurement practices to better deploy advanced technologies, build aviation security capacity at overseas last point of departure airports with direct flights to the United States, and harmonize security technology standards between the U.S. and key foreign partners. On his left is Mr. Rongo Shui. He is the Commander-in-Chief of Air Marshals in the Public Security Bureau of the Civil Aviation Administration of China. During his 26 years in aviation security and civil aviation policing, he was engaged in the development of a wide range of regulatory documents and contributed to the development and implementation of security audits and the development of security management systems. Since 2011, Mr. Shui has been in charge of aviation security regulations and standards, development and implementation of national regulatory rules, security training, international cooperation, industry reform, and the leading of air marshals. Next to Monsieur Lefoyer, on his left, is Mr. Weixiong Chen. He is currently Deputy Executive Director of the Counter-Terrorism Committee, Executive Directorate of the United Nations Security Council. Mr. Chen is extremely well-versed on policies and programs relating to the United Nations and security. He is the author of 2 books on the work of the UN Security Council and China's multilateral diplomacy. Among his many responsibilities in the area of security, he notably served as head of the UN counter-terrorism delegations on many complex country assessment visits and negotiated with member states on their capacity-building needs and documents. Ms. Angela Gittens is Director General of Airports Council International since 2010. Prior to that, she was airport CEO for Miami and Atlanta and deputy at San Francisco International Airport. In other previous roles, she served as Vice President, Airport Business Services for HNTB Corporation, where she led the firm's practice in airport business and strategic planning. She has also overseen the transition to private ownership of London Luton Airport and managed operation contract at several airports in the US and Canada. And finally, Mr. Nick Kareen, Senior Vice President, Airports, Passenger, Cargo, and Security at IATA. In that capacity, he is responsible for IATA's relations with airports, fuel supply, passenger experience, cargo security, and ground handling for IATA member airlines and industry partners around the world. Nick built his career in Air Canada and its subsidiary Jazz, where his last role was as Air Canada Vice President for Airport, Call Centers, Customer Relations. a position he held from 2013-2014. He brings with him a wealth of experience covering flight and aircraft operations, human resource management, and government relations. There, ladies and gentlemen, is our panel of experts for this morning, and now I turn it over to Sylvain as the moderator of our expert panel. Sylvain, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Denis. Good morning, everybody. I'm very honored to be moderating this Leaders Plenary. That's a real chance for me to be here today. So we'll go through a couple of questions that we have prepared for these leaders to interact. We didn't want to have a succession of speeches and try to make it as lively as possible. So we'll go through the first question. And this question is rather directed to organizations, but it can also apply to states. So we've talked about United Nations Security Council Resolution 2309, about the Global Aviation Security Plan, the GASeP, both of which have been adopted, the first one in 2016, and the GASeP in 2017, last year, in this building. What actions have your organization taken since? What implementation challenges do you see in the upcoming years? So for this question, I will first turn to the organizations that are working with ICAO and across the street. So I will turn to ACI. Ms. Gittens, please, can you share your thoughts with us on this question?
Well, in addition to working with ICAO to assist in the GASeP, we have taken some direct actions with our membership. One is to recognize that the security, aviation security, is not just for the aircraft, which is where aviation security has put its focus. But we really, as airports, have to look at the whole airport, all of the customers at the airport, all of the employees at the airport, and the very expensive and vital infrastructure of the airport. So we developed a handbook for our members and for regulators on landside security, which has been a target in the last couple of years. So that we have some practical recommendations to make for airports and their governments to follow in securing the overall airport, not just the access to the aircraft. As well as we've taken a direct action to help our members. We had started an Airport Excellence, or APEX, in safety program some 8-9 years ago. And that has proven successful, where we assemble a review panel of experts from airports using the community of airports to help one another. And that's proven successful. So we started that in security. And we started as a pilot program in the beginning. And we were concerned that unlike safety, security in airports is actually accomplished by different jurisdictions. It's set up differently in every country. So we thought that would be a problem. Turns out it has not been a problem. So we've been able to organize the program in a way that's been helpful no matter what the setup is in the country. We've gotten the support of the European Union, which is funding some of these, or helping to fund some of these. So that has turned out to be successful, and we have managed to get the attention of our security experts at various airports, and we have some 100 peer reviewers. So at any time that an airport or a government would want a security peer review, we have a full portfolio of experts that are willing to travel and provide that kind of insight. So we've been pretty busy on this issue.
So, thank you very much, Mrs. Gittens. And listening to you, I hear that cooperation is important, that you've built aviation security culture in ACI, building on the history and experience on safety. Maybe I will turn now to Ayata and to ask the very same question on what actions and what implementation challenges you see. But also, it was said that aviation security started by aircraft protection. And can you give us your views on the trend and the process that led to today's situation?
Okay, well, I'll start with answering the first question, and then when you're through in there, I'll try to attempt to answer that. So what we've done, with respect to support of the GASeP industry collaboration, which Angela talked about, I mean, that's a given. ICAO, ACI, regional associations, governments, etc. One thing we also had recognized that we needed to do, which is expand our network in terms of dealing with the regulators themselves, and not necessarily outside of the realm of ICAO, and dealing with states directly, whether that's with the TSA, with the UK DFT and others, to try to establish that network to be able to have conversations in this realm. Bolstered our security manual, bolstered our audit program. We're improving data collection, which is something that was referenced in GASeP, training and education and developing a culture. Talk a lot about risk-based and implementing SEMS as a requirement, and a risk-based approach to security, which we are not where we need to be in terms of that. So we've been busy as well, but when it comes to what actions our organizations have taken, I think what's more important is what actions have not been taken, or the challenges as you posed the question. And the challenges are, when you look at GASeP in totality, I could list every one of the recommendations in there, whether it's culture, whether it's data, whether it's certification. These are just recommended. And until we get to a state where this is a requirement, we're really not going to get the value that we would expect out of a security perspective. And so I think the challenges that we have going forward is really around the words around collaboration and acceptance and accountability. And until we get there, it's going to take too long for us to be able to implement the very good things. If you have taken the time to look at what GASeP suggests, they're valid. But I think we're going to be challenged on the acceptance of it from a global perspective. And when you talk about security, security, an argument can say, for me, in the airline industry, security does not just include the aircraft. Yeah, granted, a lot of the focus has been on the aircraft for obvious reasons. But security starts the minute an aircraft or a passenger books a ticket. So it starts before the facility in our mind. And so, yeah, I totally agree with Angela that security is not only about the aircraft. It's the asset, yes, that often targeted, but really it starts long before that in the process, and everything that we do needs to take that into consideration.
Thank you very much for these views. Just to comment on something you said about coming from recommendations to requirements for the GASeP. The GASeP has been defined to be a tool to help states, industry, and organizations to implement standards and recommended practices that are already existing in Annex 17. So if new standards or requirements are needed, maybe this will have to be brought into the regulatory process of ICAO for discussion. But today the GASeP is not a set of new requirements. It's really a tool to help implement the Annex 17. So for the very same question, I will now turn to states. So I will not raise this question to CTED or to Dr. Liu, because CTED and ICAO have been key to this resolution and plan. But now I'd rather turn to Mr. Katko to have no, maybe not Mr. Katko, but Mr. Jouet. Yeah, you'll be answered. Okay, so Mr. Katko to answer this same question.
Sure. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I've been looking forward to coming to this conference for quite a while. In Congress, I get briefed daily on the threat matrix in aviation security, and it's pretty clear that the bad guys are advancing at a rapid pace, and bombs the size of this can take down an airliner. So with that as a background, I want to echo Nick's sentiments that these standards are laudable and But the problem is, how are we going to get all the member countries to come into compliance? And how are they going to be able to afford to do that? I know other questions we have going forward are going to discuss that as well. But I think it's very important for us to understand that a lot of times people look at ICAO standards and they say, well, they meet a minimum ICAO standards, so that means their airports are safe and their countries are safe to travel into. And I think we've got to dispel that notion and constantly be striving for greater security. And that's why I'm heartened to see the UN resolution and the GASeP as a step in that direction. But Nick is absolutely right that these shouldn't just be concepts, they should be requirements. And then I know we can discuss with other questions in more depth how we help these countries that may not be able to afford to adhere to these concepts, how we can help them come into compliance with them. Make no mistake about it, United States is a #1 target, and they probe these targets by going through other countries to get to our country. And so it's incumbent upon us to work with all countries to make all countries' airports as safe as possible and to help them make them as safe as possible. And that's something I want to hear from not just today, but from all of you moving forward, is how we can be a better partner with all of you to make your country's airport systems as safe. Because as a security component, we're all together in one chain, and we're only as strong as our weakest link. And if we have weak links, we need to work collectively to fix them. And that, to me, is the biggest challenge I see going forward with the UN resolution as well as the GASeP.
谢谢。
Thank you. At the beginning of this century, ICAO identified 3 themes: security, safety, and sustainable development. Since Dr. Liu became the SecGen, we highly appreciated ICAO's efforts to promote security, to enhance its implementation. First of all, in 2016, UN Security Council adopted Resolution 2309 and included aviation security as a national priority. All of you know that aviation suffers threats from all fronts. Therefore, we need all fronts, all sectors, and all governments, and all law enforcement agencies and information agencies, security agencies to collaborate together. I'm very glad to see that CTED is also present at this meeting. After the adoption of Resolution 2309, SecGen Dr. Liu, with the support of the Transport Bureau, helped to promote the adoption of the Aviation Security Plan. As we have heard, this plan has included different SARPs with regard to security and facilitation and aspects of 2309 resolution. However, with regard to implementation, we rely on a detailed action road plan. In our view, this global plan is a very important tool to facilitate the implementation at the national level. This week marks the Global Security Week. As far as I know, this is the first time that we have such important event to mark the importance of aviation security. It consists of industry discussions and some workshop for the government and industry leaders. This is unprecedented. So all sectors and all governments from all levels are all included. We give our high appreciations and applaud such efforts. In China, more than 60 regions and states have direct flights to China. Therefore, The emphasis of China's aviation security is to secure the security of all these flights flying from and to China. We also have flights connecting more than 60 states and 160 cities. Therefore, we also need your collaboration and cooperation to secure the safety and security as well as efficiency of the aviation system. So this is my answers to the first question. Thank you.
Now I will give the floor to Mr. Chen from CTED, and after we will wrap up on this question with Dr. Liu.
Good morning, everybody.
From the United Nations, I come from New York. And you know what? In all the the malls and department stores, salespersons, if they know Chinese, they tend to boost their sales quotas. But that's the aside from the topics. I would like to turn to the English, one of the 6 official languages of the UN. The changes we have seen since the adoption of the Resolution 2309 was, first of all, the terrorism landscape. I think 4 years ago, we were talking about the outbound foreign terrorist fighters. But now, we are now most concerned about the inbound foreign terrorist fighters, relocators, returnees, coming back to the country of the origin, nationality, and also the third country. So this poses a real and present threat. Coupled with the other the threats like the production of IEDs, cyber risks and threats, the critical infrastructure, soft targets, lone actors, homegrown violent extremists. So I think that's something we have seen since the adoption of the resolution. The second change we have seen in the United Nations, in New York, is that after that resolution, we have seen progress in ICAO about the adoption and now the promotion of GASeP. The GASeP is so important too that the Council in the United Nations also adopted another resolution last December, 2396, which very, very clearly welcomed this document and also asked CTED to work with ICAO for promotion and also implementation for the purpose of preventing, detecting, investigating those foreign terrorist fighters, the FTF returnees, and relocators. The third point, which I feel that when you talk about the good tool, as mentioned by the Secretary General just now in her opening statement about the GASeP, we are all aware that in this forum and also in the forum of the United Nations in New York, we are not short of good papers. We are not short of good action plans. In fact, every day in New York and Turtle Bay, they produce good papers. So action plan only remains plans on papers if they're not put into action. So there are at least 3 areas I could foresee that we should focus in the coming years in order to get this GASeP and also the other ICAO standards and recommended practices into practice. Number 1 is to translate the commitment into action. I think that's important. The second one is also, with the English letter C, is the capacity. I think from New York, we have identified there are at least 4 categories of states under the GASeP. Number 1, the first category of states is are the states of high capacity. The second category is the states that have some shortfalls and gaps, and they are able to fix it themselves. The third category of states are the states which want to do it, but they lack capacity. They don't know how to do it, either legislative, institutional, technical, budgetary. They need help. So I think if you're talking about no one should be left behind, then who is going to drag them along? So that's a good question. The last C for our next phase of focus is the collaboration. It's not about member states like you are here sitting there. It's also about the industry, the private sectors, stakeholders, the trust between them. So I think that's the 3 C's. And just remember, my name is also, Mr. Chen is also C. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. C.
Okay. Thank you, all the previous speakers. As we all indicated, United Nations Security Council Resolution 2309 is a historical document for aviation security, and is also in the whole our aviation history. This is the first of this kind of resolution, which achieved and adopted unanimously in the UN Security Council. And following that resolution, ICAO Council adopted the Global Aviation Security Plan, which is also another very important document, can guide the states to implement UN Security Council resolution and ICAO's standards and recommended practices. Since these 2 documents are so important, and also which are the principal guidance for ICAO to take actions, ICAO took a series steps and measures to implement. The first is strengthen partnership. We strengthen partnership with United Nations organizations, like we have CTED, and we have World Customs Organization. We have corporate partnership strengthened with Office of Counter-Terrorism of United Nations. And we also strengthened cooperation partnership with various other international organizations in the different areas. In addition, we strengthen partnership with our member states. That's also very, very important. And then you can see we have IATA, we have ACI. This is also, we strengthen this partnership with our industry partners. So with all these efforts, we are able to work together. In order to implement a global aviation security plan, ICAO took a regional approach, taking into account each regional context. As you know, as in my opening remarks, we adopted regional roadmaps in the 5 regions, and these regional roadmaps can help us to address the global plans with regional specificality. However, I'm still concerned with the level of GASeP CMA's implementation. As you know, in our Global Aviation Security Plan, GASeP, there are clear aspirational goals for 2020, 2023, and 2030. However, look at our current scores in each region. Majority of the regions are far below of the target for 2020. That means immediate and active, dedicated efforts should be taken in order for all of us to reach this 2020 goal with less than 2 years. And then another concern I also would like to share with you, though we got very unanimously strong support by United Nations Security Council Resolution 2309, however, this verbal support does not necessarily always reflect it in the physical manifestation in the member states, at the airport, at other aviation, by airlines, or by individual personnel working in the aviation communities. So that means we need more efforts from political will, and then really implement it at the global and at our member states, at our industry level. For that part, we even need to have more closer cooperation and with our member states and with our international communities. Another concern I want to also share with you, as you all appreciate ICAO's leadership. And for ICAO to be able to carry out this task, in particular for the GASeP implementation, the resources in ICAO dedicated for aviation security is not sufficient. So that is also a challenge for us. I would like to also to seek your support in order for ICAO to be able to carry out a task and work together with our member states and industry to reach the targets and goals of our global aviation security plan and UN Security Council Resolution 2309. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Liu, and that's a perfect transition for the second question. Kirsty? Thank you very much. So we talked about resolutions, plans, commitments, plans going into action, but when we have to take concrete action, there's a question of resources. So how do you best allocate resources in order to reduce the probability of a successful attack against civil aviation to an acceptable level? That's a question on choice, political choice and resource constraint. So now I will turn maybe to Congressman Katko to address this question.
Sure, and this is something I kind of alluded to in my first answer, but resource allocation is always an issue. I led a congressional delegation to Europe and the Middle East last year, and when we went to Europe, we went to Schiphol Airport in particular, and in Amsterdam, and they had the three-dimensional scanners, which are the cutting-edge scanners, which can help really keep up with the advancing threats from the terrorist community. And it was clear to me that we needed these in the United States, and it was clear to the United States that they needed them in the United States. And we didn't have any. So I go to Schiphol, and there are multiple machines at Schiphol that do the 3D scanning, which really is cutting-edge technology. And I come back to the United States, and first of all, I look at the machines and ask them where they were made. They were all made in the United States. And none of them were being implemented in the United States because we didn't prioritize it. So countries have to prioritize security. It's one of those things that's really not negotiable in my mind. So since that time, we've been pushing for more funding for this. And the next several years, we're going to have a lot more of them on the front lines of American airports. But the problem is we would need about 2,400 to 2,500 of those machines at $250,000 a machine at a minimum to meet all the aviation security needs across the country. And we were allocated a mere fraction of those this year, and we're trying to get more and more in the years to come. That is a challenge, but getting your individual governments to prioritize a security component is something that's very important. Now, to overlay with that, the larger member states, such as the United States and some of the others that are here today, should be willing and able partners in that. And we should be willing and able to help those countries that do not have the capacity for, and some member states here that do not have the capacity, financial wherewithal to do that. That's why I strongly support TSA's Office of Global Strategies and their desire and ability to build and train capacity in other countries. And it's also why I authored legislation granting TSA the authority to donate screening equipment, excess screening equipment, which we have a lot of, to other countries as a means of enhancing their security aviation. And I hope we're starting to see the benefits of that going forward. But I think it's, like I said before, you know, we're only strong as our weakest link. We need to recognize that as not just a saying, but as a mission statement, because we're all in this together. We know that. And we know from past attacks that the bad guys are constantly trying to get at us. So we have to help each other as best we can, and we have to recognize, and I think we need to encourage the member states that struggle to keep up with the security to not sweep it under the rug or not to keep it from public view, but to bring it to us so that then we can help them build the security that they need, and without compromising their economic well-being. And that's what we have to do. And I think it's really going to take all of us working together to allocate the resources where they need to be, but also advocating to our own governments the priority of security and the priority of cutting-edge security. Because, like I've said, and I'll keep saying it until you guys are sick of hearing it from me, if we don't continue to on a quest to keep up with what they're trying to do to us, then we're all going to pay a very serious price. And I'd like to not get to that point. So the U.S. should be helping, and other countries should be helping, but we should be doing this together to try and plug the security gaps.
Thank you. Just now we talked about resource allocation. I believe with regard to resource, we need to pay attention to the following aspect. Firstly, in terms of the architecture, the organization, the institutional responsibilities, capabilities, personnel, including the budget, whether at ICAO level or at the member state level. As have been said by my neighbor, we need to give priority in the member states to security, and this is non-negotiable. This is our priority, it is primary, because in terms of safety, security, and sustainable development, safety and sustainable development, it comes as a natural result of what we are doing. However, security is more of a challenge. The aviation community and the various levels of the government need to receive support in this. That's why the UN Resolution 2309 is so important and carries great significance. Secondly, how can we place the necessary resources to where they are most needed? This is one of our main topic. That is how we can do information sharing and to benefit from it. We talk about big data, information sharing, how we can retrieve information in this vast ocean of information, including the inbound of these foreign terrorist fighters. In terms of the aviation security, we need to share these information. In China, we do mainly two things. Firstly, with regard to passenger information, we will do evaluation of passenger. based on the information, we have differentiated screening of passengers. Yesterday, the capital airport, we have representatives from the capital airport has made remarks on this. Based on the differentiation, we will differentiate those who are receiving the screening. And also, we differentiate the equipment, technical equipment used, and also the process is differentiated. Therefore, our resources is used where they are most needed and appropriate. In many cities in China, we have those with an output turnover of over 10 million. We have over 20 such airports. Secondly, we also differentiate the passenger information so that based on this, we have different policies. We have a white list, black list. Our American colleagues have a similar practice. This is a very, we have a expertized list, and we also have a 3+N list, that is flight, crew, and security. And this N is the passenger. So we have this white list. Sometimes we have someone who are in flight unarmed. We need to restrain or deal with these kind of people. Based on information and the big data, we have carried out measures and appropriate resource allocation, both on ground and in flight, so that they are used most efficiently. This is what we are doing and some experiment. I hope that in the future, we can have more exchanges on this and exchange information. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for this state's perspective on resource allocation and the importance of aviation security as a priority for states. Now for the time that's remaining, I will take the two next questions in a row. So I will raise the questions on the threat and the next one on the information sharing. And I will ask each of you to give your views on what is the most concerning threat you are considering today and for the near future, and how can we best share information on this threat in order that people that are doing the screening and people that are involved in aviation security can do their job in an appropriate way, knowing what they are searching for, why they are searching it, and how to detect it. So maybe I will start on my left with Ms. Gittens. So what is the most concerning threat, and how can you what can you see on information sharing?
Quite frankly, to me, the biggest threat going forward is the growth that we see in air service demand, where we are looking at doubling of passenger volume in a very short period of time, something like 17 years, and anywhere from 15 to 20 years, depending on the forecast. And it's going to be impossible for us to double what we are now doing. We can't double the number of security queues. We're not going to be able to double all of these efforts. We don't know what the next threat's going to be. The threats we already have don't go away, so there'll be new threats on top of the current threats. So my concern is if we don't start looking at this more holistically, we're going to really wind up being very much behind. The approach has got to change. I saw yesterday, we see there's some technology that's going to allow us to look at things differently. But institutionally and organizationally, we also have to start making some changes. Looking at more standoff type of threat detection, way more use of intelligence. The issue of sharing, which is another part of the question, the issue of sharing is very delicate. I do appreciate that. And certainly we have to be extremely careful about sharing any raw data. But in terms of allowing us to point out what may be targets, either in approach or actual physical, the physical target or the approach that that might be taken, so that we have more pinpoint mitigation methods. I think is a direction we need to start taking. We don't have a lot of time, in terms of the growth, let alone the threats. So those are some of my concerns.
Thank you very much. Can we have IATA's views on the threat and information sharing?
Okay. Just to build on what Angela had to say in terms of the threat, I tend to agree. Growth is going to be a bigger concern than we give it credit for in terms of the rapid pace that the industry is moving at. And I think the other threat, it's not specific. It's lack of action. We've already heard it here today of all the great things that have been suggested. Yet again, there is nothing that requires anybody to do anything about it. The more, as the congressman had alluded to, the more mature nations will, and that's a given. And yes, I understand the differentiation between the four categories that the UN would supply to nations that aren't quite there yet and those that are. But the fact that we would put a target for Annex 17 compliance that would take us out to 2030, that says it all. For us as an industry. I realize it's not simple, but then it goes back to accountability. And we talk about resources and threats and information sharing. I mean, if we don't get there, we're never going to accomplish what we need. That we will never have the resources to match the demand at the pace the industry will grow at. Dead stop. If we don't have collaboration within governments themselves, and you look at an airport itself, you've got customs that works in isolation from the security checkpoint. You've got air marshals that don't speak to anyone else in the security realm. You have the intelligence agency that does not speak to any of them. So the resources that look at this aren't even collaborating within their own jurisdictions, let alone asking them to do it from one country to the other. The lack of consistency out there drives an incredible amount of lack of resources or resources being inappropriately deployed. As the gentleman indicated, what's happening in China and in the U.S., limited elsewhere, in terms of differentiation of screening. We are putting a golf ball through a garden hose, and that garden hose is going to get smaller, and we just continue to think that we're going to be able to do it the same way as we've already done and expect a different result, which is the definition of insanity, which I think everybody in this room understands. We really need to take action here in terms of using advanced passenger information that everybody's asking for but is not even being shared. To use that for differentiation of screening to be able to provide for a different checkpoint, a different experience. Treating 100% of our customers the same way is not going to get us to where we need to be. So until we start to work in these directions, start implementing these things, start holding people accountable, and start dealing with it, our threat will continue to grow, and it will be based on our growth and are based on our lack of action.
Thank you very much for this very direct and comprehensive view, and thanks for participating in our groups, working groups and panels to remind us the views of industry.
Thank you. Mr. C speaks again. When I was in school, I think my teacher told me, "Hey, Chen, knowledge is power." Nowadays, it seems the motto has to be changed as information is power. And it is power. So, but how to share information? That's a big question. The reason of sharing information and the importance is highlighted in at least two Security Council resolutions, 2309 and last December, as I mentioned, 2396, regarding the information you collected on API and PNR, they should be shared. Now, it's easier said than done. In New York, I don't know my colleagues who are sitting next to me, my neighbors, are doing every day. This is lack of sharing information. There are tools that are available to be used, but they are not used, like the Interpol Lost and Stolen Travel Documents Database. How many can you confirm your jurisdictions have the daily hits? Because this is the ready tool for you to share information, the lost and fake passports, travel documents. Now, the third point, which nobody mentioned, but I need to stress, when you share information, the other side of the coin is the full respect for human rights and privacy. So I think that's a tricky one. Now, the information sharing, I think it concerns first, legislation, second, institution, third, personnel, fourth, training, and also equipment. I was in a couple of countries which belong to the least developed countries. When you were at the airports, the small airports, you find the situation was unacceptable. Sometimes they were running out of power. Personnel there did not know how to use laptops, and there were no laptops. So, and then training. Today we met the guy or met the lady. The second day, they may be promoted, demoted, or fired. So we will be talking about training, not for the one-time training, but it should be sustained training. And it needs money. And lastly, the maintenance of the equipment to share information is a capital-intensive project. Don't tell me it's easy. It looks like the scanner there, it costs 1 million for one. And to maintain it, more than 1 million. You need technicians. So I think this is going to be very important. Somebody mentioned the mega information. Somebody mentioned also the way to share it in order to prevent the terrorist threats. But I think there are many ways that we should do, and we should do it right away. Thank you.
Mr. Shui.
Most worrying concerns in security office, what we are facing every day is safety, security, and facilitation, or the conflicts among them. Security work, if not done, if it's done too much, passengers, industry, their experience will be compromised, and this is a conflict. In addition, security needs a lot of investment. The investment in security and economics of this work is also consideration, whether we need humans to do the job or we need more advanced technology for this purpose. Information sharing, more mechanisms, or better institution, what we need. There's one approach in China we can share with you. In security institution or organization structure in China, this facilitates internal sharing. The organization or the office I'm in is an office attached to CAC. It is also a division under the Public Security Ministry. We have two upper organizations. It helps to integrate manufacturers, airports, with their consensus. It also facilitates the government agencies in terms of anti-terrorism, intelligence sharing for better coordination. And within my office, we can serve these many purposes.
组织体系
Therefore, information sharing depends on optimization of structure. organizational structure. And this point will continue to be a topic in the following 2 days. We support the proposals and suggestions from concerned stakeholders in improving the structure for security, including improvement of personnel establishment. And with the condition of zero resource growth, we can give priority to security against the context of evolving threat. I know that after 9/11, many security projects funded by a lot of donations on ad hoc basis. We hope ICAO would include security into regulatory budget to implement more audit in this aspect. In ICAO, we borrow the practice of ICAO in 2003. We are one of the first ones to receive the audit, and we established our own audit system. We have carried 3 rounds of audits. 2005 to in 2005, it's focused on airport, and the second round of audit, we will focus on SMS, and airlines will be the focus of audit. And since 2005, we established a sustained security monitoring system, and we implement the CMA on documentation audit. ICAO has a lot of efforts in this aspect. However, due to many restraints in terms of resources because of missions, conferences, meetings, I feel that it is not sufficient, and on a lot of occasions, we have teleconferences instead of physical meetings. I hope ICAO will enhance efforts and join member states in this regard. Thank you.
Now I will ask Congressman Katko to give his views on first the threat and second information sharing.
Sure, and thank you very much. Evolving, and the fact that the bad guys are constantly trying to probe our vulnerabilities is a sign that this threat is not going away, and it's probably going to get worse. And it's probably going to get worse because of the increase in travel and the increase for gaps in our security. But let's face it, what we've seen in the last few years, and all of these things concern me greatly going forward. The non-secure areas of airports, the more travel you have, the more juicy the target is for terrorists to come in and conduct an attack. The insider threat is something that I don't think we pay enough attention to. The insider threat, I can give you a good example. In the United States, Dallas-Fort Worth Airport in the last couple of years has had 2 major drug smuggling operations that were going on with employees. Drugs are one thing, but what else did it happen there that gave us an indication of the vulnerabilities? One man was told that somebody was checking flight manifests to see which flight the air marshals were on, and another individual as part of this ring told one of the undercover officers that were working on the case that they'll smuggle in drugs, they'll smuggle in guns, they'll even smuggle in bombs if you want us to. It's no big deal. Now, if you think in the United States alone there's close to 1 million airport employees, and you just need one that is radicalized over the internet, for example, or one of them is disaffected for whatever reason, or somebody that is in a tough way and is an easy target for a terrorist to get them to smuggle something in, you've got a huge problem. When I first got to Congress, I became aware of a case in which 10 or 12 trips were taken from Atlanta's airport to New York City was an individual who got on the airplane with a backpack full of handguns and assault weapons, most of which were loaded. And he got that way because an airport employee knew he wasn't going to get screened, would carry the bags through the secure area of the airport, hand them to his buddy in the secure area who got on the plane, and it was only luck that they caught him after his 10th trip. So the insider threat is a very real threat, and we haven't heard a lot of discussion about it, but it's something else that we need to keep an eye on. And moving forward, I think we need to understand the importance of the information sharing in all of this. Information sharing is critically important. Information sharing that I experienced when I was a prosecutor for 20 years, agencies that were working on the same task force with me didn't always share information with each other. And it's maddening. It's a constant problem at all levels of government in all countries. And we've got to strive to make sure that we break down those barriers, and we've done that with much legislation in the wake of the Paris bombings to try and do that. But information sharing is a gigantic issue going forward. But something Mr. Crean has been hammering today, and I have been seconding as best I can, is the fact that the biggest threat I see to aviation security is everything. And if we don't take some of these suggested best practices and turn them into enforceable standards, we are going to continue to be vulnerable. And as we continue those vulnerabilities and the travel capacities continue to increase, we're going to make ourselves much worse. And vigilance is the bottom line. And we let our guard down in the United States before 9/11. We weren't as vigilant as we should have been. There was plenty of indications of concerns and plenty of indications of problems, and we didn't act. And then we had thousands of people that were killed, and it profoundly changed our way of life because we weren't vigilant enough. And we have to have that same post-9/11 mindset the United States has now. We need to have that with aviation security. All these standards are great, all these suggested practices are great, but if we don't take security more seriously and invest in it the way we need to invest in it, we are going to be here in years to come talking about more tragedies like the Metrojet and the others. And that's just a fact. So we have to have the vigilance, we have to have the wherewithal, and we have to have the drive to push our respective countries and ICAO to tighten the screws on these standards and make sure that we are more vigilant moving forward. Vigilance is the name of the game, and these threats are multifaceted and they're real. And information sharing and investing in technology and investing in convincing our respective governments that this is not something that should be optional. It's not something that we say we can't afford. We can't afford not to afford it, is what I think. So with that, I just want to say I appreciate the time that you gave me to speak with you today, and I'll be happy to come back anytime going forward.
Thank you very much. I will leave the words of conclusion to my Secretary General, Dr. Liu.
Thank you. I do appreciate the inputs, advice from the previous speakers of this panel. I believe that's a very important what we say and what we should focus. One, I heard working together, partnership. And then another thing issue is security, aviation security. Need every part of the sector to contribute. Then the important thing I think is we need to build security culture across our sector, just like a safety culture in aviation. So we need to build security culture. And that is what I think with our member states, with all our stakeholders work together. We should work on this and to make significant improvement and progress in this regard. And then I would like to echo Mr. Katko, you just mentioned inside threats. This, I believe, is one of the vulnerabilities the member states we should address, and industry, together with industry. And then ICAO can play important role to timely develop and update our standards. And then through our USAP, CMA, the audit, risk-based, performance-based, I think we should encourage this audit. And then by implementation of our member states and with strengthened technical assistance, capacity building. And like we emphasize, no country left behind, to ensure every link of our global network is strong. Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Dr. Liu. Just before handing over to our Master of Ceremony, Denis Chagnon, I would like to say that it was not intended to have interaction with the floor. It's deliberate to get you frustrated so that you will ask a lot of questions during the 5 sessions to come. So now I hand over to Denis.
Well put, Sylvain. You have a way with words that I very much appreciate. Let's have a warm hand of applause for our panel. And I invite them all to stay behind for the family portrait. Just a few words on the application again. It was introduced yesterday during Engagement Day, and it proved very, very successful. We had a number of questions, we had polling activities, and some of the members were kept in touch with other participants, sending comments and photos and so on, a sort of Facebook approach related, of course, to the symposium. So it works very well. You have on the screen the address, and in the program, on the first page of the program, again, you have all of the instructions on how to download the app, depending on your particular phone or platform, and also all of the features of the app. So we really encourage you to use it starting at the next session to put some questions to our panelists. A reminder as well of the Aviation Security and Facilitation Information Booth. It's located on the 5th floor, just in front of the elevators, and we have as our first team this morning from the regions, the Asia Pacific region. So we have some of our people from the region to introduce you to some of the security programs, activities, but more to the point, respond to some of your questions, specific questions that you might have about security and facilitation in that area. We have a lot of documents for you to pick up as well. We will be back from the coffee break. I'd like to make it at 11:10, so we still have our full 30 minutes for the coffee break to be able to enjoy a break and network with your fellow participants and engage into very constructive conversations with our exhibitors. Thank you so much for your participation this morning. We'll see you at 11:10, and the coffee break, the coffee break is sponsored by ACI. So thank you, ACI, for the coffee break. See you in 30 minutes.